That was fantastic. Owen, would you mind introducing everybody?
Introducing everyone?
Yeah.
All right, so over here on trombone, we have Tony Cesarero. Back there behind the keys is Liam Driscoll. Here on tenor sax, our sax god, Aaron Whittemer. Behind the drum set, we have Eitan Miller. Our bass master is Kern DeVico. And I'm Owen LaChance.
Oh, and you gotta say that with a jazz voice, you know what I mean? You gotta get deep, you gotta reach down.
With a CHS jazz band. All right, so we have one more song we're gonna play for you. It's called Tenor Madness. Ready?
Guys, that was fabulous. Thank you so much. For those of you who don't know, and I didn't know until Tom Salvis suggested we do this, this is Jazz Appreciation Month.
Can you come to every meeting?
Yes, you guys should come to every meeting. Liam, I can't brush my teeth as well with one hand as you play the keys with one hand. I don't know how you do that. Guys, that was terrific. Thank you so much for making this a special start to our meeting.
Do I have to read the opening public statement, please? The New Jersey Open Public Meeting Laws was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice of and to attend the meetings of public bodies at which any business affecting their interest is discussed or acted upon. In accordance with the provisions of this Act, the School District of the Chathams of Education has caused notice of this meeting to be published by having the date, time, and place thereof posted on the Board Administrative Offices, sent to the clerks of the Chatham Borough and Chatham Township, the Library of the Chathams, the Chatham Courier, the Daily Record, the Star Ledger, and the Independent Press. Mr. Pete with a roll call.
Sure, Mr. Gilfillan.
Yes.
Mr. Arndt.
Here.
Ms. Chambers.
Here.
Ms. Chickarelli.
Yes.
Ms. Clark.
Here.
Ms. Kenny.
Here.
Mr. Ryan. Here. Mr. Valenti. Here. And Ms. Weber. 8 President of the Council.
I'm going to rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, tonight is the first part of the meeting is the reorganization meeting. Pete, do we go by individual groups so we got to move action items A1 through, or can we do all?
Do one resolution for the A's, B's, and the
Okay,
item with 3 separate.
No, I'd like to do it all in one.
I have a question
Yes, ma'am.
about these. I noticed that some of these say that at the recommendation of the superintendent, and some of them say the Board of Education appoints. So I was curious as to how long some of these appointments have been made. All right, like
Or annual,
for years
so-
and years and years?
Go ahead, Pete.
It depends on the specific appointment. For example, some of them are going into at least 3, 4, or 5 years. Some of them are new. If we have a particular vendor, like for example the medical director that we like doing business with, and they keep reasonable rates, we just continue doing business because it's convenient. We get a good service.
Right. And how about our architect of record?
The architect was put into place slightly or shortly before I started, so I'm going to say that they're in their 6th or 7th year.
Okay.
The accounting firm, about the same. The brokers of records, about the insurance brokers, approximately the same.
Okay, so
even though one insurance broker went through a name change, but we go through a perspective where we review the services and the prices we're being charged to make sure they're accurate. And if the superintendent, myself, and board is happy, we continue.
Okay, because I misunderstood the way that read then. Because one of the questions I had is, so we have an architect of record that we pay every year for reviewing, do they work with us on our long-range facilities plan? And do they
Yes.
review those things?
Typically, what the architect does, if we know that we're going to do a project, the architect will prepare all the documents necessary for that project, and we pay a flat fee based on the cost of the project. If we come and say, hey, we'd like to consider doing this, then that's something we pay at the hourly rates. But most of the work with the architect is done on, basically on a project base.
So-
And the architect is involved with all of the plans as the superintendent and I, and we meet with the principals as to certain enhancements. They're involved and help us with the long-range facility plan.
Okay, so are they responsible for like reviewing the buildings as is and recommending any architectural changes on a regular basis?
I don't know if I'd say architectural changes, but they come through with any ideas that we have. For example, in the earlier part of the budget, we were considering security enhancements to the entrances.
Right.
The architect was brought in, gave a preliminary evaluation, and said, here's some approximate cost. Based on the cost and other areas of need, the finance committee decided, well, we don't have the funds to do that right now.
Sure.
So that was put aside, but they evaluate different projects. Like they've evaluated the the potential of when the track will need to be resurfaced and things of that nature.
Oh, that's super, because I was fortunate enough to spend the day with Dr. LaSousa on Wednesday, visiting several of the schools in the township. I'm going to be visiting with him again to tour the schools in the borough next 2 weeks from now. And we saw some emergent issues in one of our elementary schools. So I was wondering if the architect of record would look at that and make recommendations.
If we ask them about it, yes. Typically, we have a process with any issue that goes from, let's say, a teacher discovers something, it goes to the building head custodian. The head custodian can't address the issue, then it becomes a maintenance item. The maintenance department would look at it, and then if it's beyond their scope, obviously then architect or outside vendor to come service it, or architect if necessary, depending on the scope of the project.
And I had one other question. How do we review these appointments every year? Is there an evaluation system that we look at? Do we have like reviews on record that we can go in and look at and review?
Not, a lot of them are informal, like the ones that typically deal with the business office, we judge the service we get. For example, some of the ones that deal with the schools, where services the school get, we get input from the high schools, specifically on if you want to take the medical or drug screening vendors, if they're happy with the service and it's reasonable cost, we continue.
Yeah.
And a lot of time it's convenience, and I know in some of the conversations with Lisa Lattarullo, they were key as to the hours that certain providers were open, because they had to be coincide with school hours. So
Right.
that's one of the reasons, and they would, if they're pleased with the services and reasonable price, we continue.
Yeah, okay, and I had one more question, because this is, I'm new, and I'm just trying to understand what I'm going to be voting on tonight. There's a long list on the agenda of appointments that we make, from anywhere from a Section 504 officer to a chemical hygiene officer. Do we know who these people are? Are they going to be, have they been asked to do this already? Or are they doing it now?
Everyone who's on that list is basically, you're anteing up for another year.
Okay, and I'm just wondering, is there an extra stipend, or is these individuals, or is this in addition to responsibilities?
They are individuals. A bulk of the individuals are sitting right in this room.
Right.
For the supervisor
Right.
of buildings and grounds, that comes, a lot of that falls under his CFM certification, his Certified Facility Manager certificate, and to do that. As well as the principals are typically the attendance coordinators. So that is part of everyone's duties and job descriptions.
And are there extra stipends? Are they?
Not for any of
those
those
appointments?
in the annual appointments. no.
Okay, I just wasn't sure about that. And I had another question, B3, the standard operating procedures. Does that cover our policy section on, the 8,000s, all the operations? Is that what that is?
No, the policies, all of the
couldn't find that.
policies the board follows are covered somewhere else. The standard operating procedures are more of a business operation. Where if you
Okay.
look at B3 and B4,
Yeah.
standard operating and the purchasing manual, or business or typical nuts and bolts operation, not the education, but how we run the district. How we
Okay,
run
so
the district
because we
from
spoke
financial and
about that.
management perspective.
Okay, so we spoke about that, but is that in your office? Can we go back and review that if we ever need to?
Yep.
Okay, so I'll probably plan to do that.
And that is, those two items are part of the CUSAC review.
Yeah, I
Those
saw
are-
that
those are
CUSAC,
required.
yep, and there was one other thing, I noticed that in our, I know that this covers, I think, from now to next year. Do we need to add our new address to public postings? Do we need to put that in here? Or
We
should-
will, once we get closer
Okay. I
to
didn't
change
know
it.
if we had to
Because that's
do it now.
something that basically things would be changed, that, okay, the Board of Ed office moves from 58 Myersville Road to, I'm gonna go out, say now, 255?
Yeah,
Lafayette, and I don't
wherever it
know.
is on
I presume
Lafayette.
we'll have the
Yeah.
same address as the high school. So that'll be something we'll do later on as we get closer to moving.
Okay, I appreciate that kind
No
of,
problem?
and one other thing, the tax shelter annuity companies that we use, when was the last time we talked to them about their schedule of fees?
This schedule,
For taking our employees' money? Like, have we
There
negotiated
are-
that at all
there are
over the
some
years?
providers that some providers charge a fee for the annual, for the semi-monthly deposit, some do not, and that's been told to the employees, so they pick the vendor that they'd like to invest their money in,
So there's-
and each employee gets to pick the individual funds. The district just says, here's the choices that we've approved. If you want to invest, you put your money where you choose.
Right, I'm not talking about a deposit fee, I'm talking about more of a management fee.
That's not something we typically.
Negotiate,
No.
okay. And our employees are pretty happy with the options that they've had?
They seem to be. I don't get much rebuttal that, oh, I don't like that one, I want this one instead.
Okay. I think that's it. And I had one more question. On the CHIPS rate for 2018, 2019, did that maintain from last year to this year?
That
The
went up.
$2,800 per year?
I'm going to defer to Dr. Dalia. I know there's a slight increase every year. I'm going to say 50 to 100.
Increased to $100.
27 to 28? And you're comfortable with that number? I'm just curious, because it's below market rate, actually, by substantial amount. So I was curious, it just seems like a nice perk to the people in the district. Okay.
I can speak to that a little bit, Mary, though.
Yeah.
When we began that program, so we have a pre-K program, obviously, for students who qualify, and then the students who pay the rate are students who wouldn't otherwise qualify for pre-K. So when we first began it, we tried to ensure that we'd have sufficient number of children to kind of have a full program. And we had the rate at $2,000. And then we've just been gradually increasing it pretty much at the same pace, I think, for the last number of years. So it is, we do have more demand than supply, I think, still. And we could always revisit and look at. And I should mention that a lot of this, we can revisit whenever we feel the need. Like we put, for example, the high school activity fee as a placeholder because we haven't determined for sure how we're going to change that yet, but the finance committee has met and plans to change that before next school year.
Again, the first time through, I just had to ask the questions because I want to get to a level of comfort if we're
Sure.
going to approve these things. I do have one more question, and it is in the Board of Education. You know what? Never mind. It's not important. That one, sorry. And I think that's it. Let me just double check. Okay, I think I'm good.
And Matt, I have a couple of questions too. I'm in the same boat that Mary's in, so if I can get some indulgence from my fellow board members just for a few minutes, I appreciate it. I'm sorry? In terms of the brokers of record, sorry, can you hear me now? Yeah. In terms of the broker of record for the health benefits, as you know, we're in the shift plan. That plan allows for the trustees of shift to appoint different positions to help them run the program for them, such as a treasurer, an administrator, an auditor, an actuary, program manager, etc. Do we know if the broker that we're using performs any of those other services for shift?
Yes, and they don't.
They don't. You
No.
sure about that?
Yeah, from everything I've gotten from the, read through from the shift that's come through, I believe Conestraw and Buckaloo does a lot of the work in guiding the shift, not Brown and Brown.
Okay, so they're not the treasurer.
No.
Okay. The architect been in place for 6 or 7 years?
Yes.
Okay, were these folks that possibly could have helped us identify electrical conduits underground that we should have known about?
The electrical conduit issue we had with the new administration building, when one of, I don't know which of the additions was done at the high school, the contractor provided what they call a set of as-built plans, which laid out exactly where the conduit was. Unfortunately, the as-built plans do not match what is actually on the ground. So the as-built plans that we were given were incorrect. That is why we ran into the conduit issue. Because I will go out on a limb and say that the conduit was on the plans 30 feet away from the building, which would have meant that it would just been in the block work, but it ended up being 20 feet away.
My question is that something that our architect should have identified?
No, because you rely on it could have been possible if they were out at each inspection and measured every step, but you rely on the contractor to provide accurate as-built.
Okay.
The 2002 edition, we believe, is when the contract.
What about the special services building? Is that something that they should have identified before it became what it became?
Typically, the architect, I don't think, until we asked, never stepped foot into the special services building, because they basically had no need to go in.
Okay.
And it was identified by some of the special services employees, as well as our staff when they went in to do annual maintenance on the boiler.
Okay. In terms of the attorney's fees, we have a board attorney retainer of $48,000, a cap of $150 on all other matters not included in the retainer, right?
Yes.
Is that correct? Okay, and we have what's our legal reserve?
The
280,000?
The district doesn't have a legal reserve per se.
Okay,
I guess
it's in the budget.
There is legal expense in the budget.
Not reserve, excuse me. It's a balance.
Correct.
Okay. So how is that balance used in terms of, so in other words, do we use that balance before expending an additional 48,000?
The balance would need to be used first. We set a cap for a cap for the additional expenses. If we need more money, then more funds need to be transferred into the legal account. And all of that gets to play with the amount of administrative expenses that the state will allow each district to have in its budget.
Okay. All right. That's cool. And I don't see insurance costs, other than health insurance costs, in the budget. Where would the line item be for insurance
They are
costs? Property
set
insurance,
out
et cetera?
in different places, because there is obviously the workers' compensation is buried into the employee benefit or the employee benefit or other employee benefit line.
Yeah, I mean,
Some of
like
the
property
others-
and casualty
Some of the
insurance.
others are put into other sections of the maintenance, or the maintenance operation or the operation of the district. So they're spread out in different areas. So
Okay,
There's not a
so-
specific line item for each of the budget summaries that the state allows to say, here's a property insurance cost or an auto insurance cost or things of that nature.
Okay, so it's spread out across, so,
If you need
so
it, I can-
standard P&C, okay, yeah,
Yeah, I can
we'll
get you the
talk about
detailed
that,
cost.
yeah.
That's easy.
I just wanted to ask about that because I didn't see it. A couple of other things, just real quick, just because I don't understand. We have a drug screening vendor, drug and alcohol treatment agency, drug and alcohol treatment counselors. Under what conditions do we use these folks?
I'm going to defer to Mike on that one.
Those are for student screenings.
I know that, but
So if we have a student who we suspect, if any staff member suspects a student may be under the influence, by law, they are obligated to notify the administrator that is on site. And then also by law, the student must submit to a drug and alcohol screening. And
we
so
pay for that versus their parents' insurance?
that depends. So usually, it depends on the circumstance.
It's up to the parent to decide, right? If they want to take them to their own,
Yes, the parent can use their own private physician, or they can use the physician that's been, appointed by the board.
Okay. I didn't know what that was for.
Yeah.
But if we require something to return to school, we have to pay for it. We can't say you have to get a drug screening, but if we're requiring that documentation for a child to return to school, then we have to provide the service.
Okay.
Right,
Doesn't
we
it
certainly
give
have
you
to
our
have it as
public
an
school?
option. You know, oftentimes parents will choose to use their own provider, but we have to we have to have it as an option if we are the ones requiring it.
Okay, that's fine. And that's all I had for now. Thank you.
Thank you
I
both.
just have a question about B19, the student activity fee, and so what we approved tonight, if this is to be revisited, we will have board discussion, an open board discussion regarding this one item
Yes.
at the recommendation of the Finance Committee?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And that would be true of any other item as well?
Right,
If we
but I just
wanted to
wanted-
make a change someplace or adjust something, we would then have a full discussion and make an alteration.
But I know this is still under consideration, so it will come
Yes.
back, and it might stay the same, possibly will come back looking different.
The intention of the Finance Committee is definitely to make a change.
Okay, so
And to
that-
increase revenue so as to support more programs.
Agreed, I'm in support of supporting more programs, but I want to have more discussion on the board level regarding that.
And then the only other, that gets to Mary's point, is that the reason we don't use individual names frequently is that in case there's a change in personnel,
agreed.
the title is what takes care of it. Yep, no, absolutely.
Go wrong.
Okay, thank you.
I feel safer already. Now I can move these things?
Oh, we're waiting on a second.
All right, move action, but I need to say, move action items A1 through 17, B1 through 32, and C1.
I second.
Second.
Thank you, Sal. I think everyone's ready to go.
Now we're back to a full board. Agenda reorganization items A1 through 17, B1 through 32, and C1. Mr. Gilfillan.
Yes.
Mr. Arnick.
Yes.
Ms. Chambers.
I just have one question.
Oh, boy.
Sorry. If we say yes tonight, does that mean we're committing to these contract amounts? Like, that can't be changed for the people that we appoint?
Anything can be changed by a future resolution. So, for example, if one of these vendors we're appointing makes a major mistake next week, we can come out on May 14th and say we're rescinding an appointment and appointing someone else.
Just wanted to make that clear, thank you. Then I would say yes.
Ms. Ciccarelli?
Yes.
Ms. Clark?
Yes.
Ms. Kenny?
Yes.
Mr. Ryan?
Yes?
Mr. Valenti?
Yes.
And Ms. Weber?
Yes.
All agenda items pass 8-0.
Now we move to our regular business meeting.
Yes.
Joe, do you have any comments?
I have no comment. Matt, I would like to know if you have comments.
No?
That's okay, no comment.
Looks like there's no superintendent report, business administration's report.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Gilfillan. I just wanted to offer up a few thank yous. The first is obviously to the jazz band. That was a neat treat. I'm sorry you missed it, Miss Weber, but we had a performance from our jazz ensemble, and they did a great job entertaining us to start the meeting. I wanted to thank Reverend Jeff Marquet. You might remember he came and appeared at a meeting a couple of meetings ago, and he spoke about an interfaith luncheon that he was planning. He extended an invitation to me and to some others, and I went this past week, and it really was a touching and moving event with all sorts of different faiths and non-faiths, as he put it, represented, and they gave a lovely lunch, and I sat with the Chatham Borough Police reps who were there, and it was just terrific. So thanks to Reverend Marquet. I wanted to thank the Chatham Education Foundation, and I saw Amanda Feeman and Alan Ruth, and I know that at casino night, Mr. Ryan, Ms. Weber, and Ms. Kenny, at least, there may have been more of you there, but I saw all three of you. It was a great event, and they put on a terrific evening to support the district, as they have been doing for so long. So special thanks to Ed Foundation. And then I also wanted to just acknowledge that the Nerd Camp that we had spoken about last meeting took place 2 weekends ago, and it was a smashing success from everything that I heard. I wasn't able to attend myself, but our teachers, Una Abrams, Christina McCabe, and Heather Rocco, kind of led the charge putting that together. Many of our other staff members also attended. It too was a very enriching and touching day, from what I understand. And I just would like to thank them. It was really a huge undertaking, not something that they get compensated for, and none of the presenters were compensated anything either. They all, a couple hundred people showed up, to participate in this special event. So that's it from me. Obviously, we have the rest of the agenda to go, and I'm happy to hear any comments from the various committees.
Ready?
I do have just a quick comment, Mike. I did attend Nerd Camp, and it was a phenomenal event. There were hundreds of teachers there, several authors. The keynote speaker was the teacher from Newtown, Connecticut, who saved 15 of her first graders by shoving them into a bathroom. Your staff should be commended. It was a perfect day. I don't know how many hours I had to put in order to execute that type of event, where they literally had 50 or 60 workshops going on in 3 different sessions with tremendous speakers in each one. I went to 2 of the sessions, and there were so many that overlapped. I could have attended 15 easily, but so please thank them on our behalf, because it was really a tremendous effort and an outstanding event.
Agreed. That's awesome.
Sorry, Matt, back to you.
You done, Mike?
I'm done.
Pete?
Sure, I just want to, the only thing I have is a brief construction update on the ongoing projects at Milton. The contractor is making steady progress, continues brickwork, and will work on the windows. For that project, and the next 3 are reporting. All scheduled construction meetings are this Thursday, so I'll have more of an update after that. At the middle school, contractor still making steady progress, still a lot of block work. It is ironic to look at, but basically every wall of the STEM addition is a cinder block wall, even the internal. So once they complete the walls, then they'll be able to forge ahead with the roof. And both the Milton and CMS contractors are on schedule, where they should be completed the end of June, beginning of July. The high school auditorium contractor is still making steady progress. The new HVAC units were installed on Saturday the 28th, and that was a rescheduled date due to our shortened spring break. It was supposed to happen the tail end of spring break, which didn't exist when the children were back in school, so that had to be rescheduled. On the central office additions, the contractor has completed all the footings and has started the the block work. One of the main items of this week's conversation will be reviewing. We know that he's behind schedule, working on his timeline and how we hope him to make up some of the delay, and we can be in the building hopefully towards the end of the summer, or at the very worst case, the beginning of the school year. On the ongoing saga of roof projects, Tremco was out to do an inspection on April 26th. For the Lafayette roof, the warranty will be issued, so that the Lafayette roof is completed. On the middle school roof, there's still a few punch list items that need to be corrected, and then the warranty can be issued. For the high school, there was still a few punch list items open. The HVAC units, as I said, were replaced. That is led to believe to replace one of the ongoing leak issues. We will determine next rain if that happened. The roofer has been lax in sending a plumber to fix the roof drain in the back of the auditorium. If the plumber doesn't appear by Wednesday, the district has a vendor lined up to fix it, and then we will back charge. And the Tremco rep is coming to do some other items this week. He's also going to inspect the older section of the roof near the girls' bathroom in the lobby, because it's claimed that the older section has the leak, which is going over by the girls' bathroom. So hopefully by the end of this week, we will have much progress and nearing completion on the auditorium. And that's the construction.
And how far behind are we? How far is the roofer's inability to find the leak and stop the leak? Is that putting us behind?
The contractor is saying now he is starting to be affected, but I will know on Thursday if his production has been typically done. I know he wanted to take, is nearing to the point to remove the scaffolds, but I know there is still a lot of ceiling work to be done, so I don't know how he can complete a lot of cleaning and other things without scaffolding. So I'll find that out and answer out on Thursday.
Okay. let us know, keep us posted.
Anything else, Pete?
Nope, that's it for me.
On the committee reports, personnel, Ms. Kenny.
Yes, personnel met at 6:30 tonight. We reviewed the shift plan and the operations as it relates to the out-of-network usage. We also reviewed the insurance, the benefits insurance renewal rates for the 2018-2019 school year. We finalized some supervisor job descriptions, and we discussed a few staff member contracts, and lastly, we discussed possible reconfiguration of supervisors. Thank you. I think that was it.
Any questions?
Oh, and our next meeting is TBD.
On the curriculum,
We have not met since our last meeting. We are meeting next Wednesday, the 9th.
next is me on finance facilities. We've met multiple times, and as you'll see on tonight's agenda, we are moving forward with the recommendation of the Finance Committee at a tax increase of 3.48%, which is lower than what our allowed number is if we used all of our different avenues in terms of bank cap, et cetera. As you guys can imagine, we've went back and forth in terms of this rate. I do want to dispel rumors that are in the marketplace and tend to be misperceived, is that we are not proponents of max the tax as a finance committee. We don't talk about that. That's like something we never heard of until someone in this crowd who spoke last time used that phrase. So I just want to make sure everyone knows we don't believe in max the tax. We are not of that ilk. That being said, there are many new things that are developing in terms of what services that our children need in today's society that we are addressing in this budget. We were able to, with Mike and Pete's help, is to do everything we wanted to do without having to move to a second question, which is something that we could have done. We could have gone to 3.62 and added a number of teachers and services, and then added a second question for mental health. With the fact that Mike and Pete understand that what our history has been in terms of our desire to be fair as possible to the children as well as the taxpayers in town. They did, in my opinion, a great job of making sure that we got everything we needed in terms of the desires of each of the individual schools and the principals, and we are fully supportive of this 3.48%. The only thing that I would think is really going to interest the board, Mike, and I would like you to address it, is just the kind of the reconfiguration, because we saw a lot of people here last time come in and really focus on teachers and what we're adding in terms of staff and how we're addressing class size, which tends to be the touchy points in terms of what parents focus on. So if you could just take a few minutes and address the board as to what we're doing from a staffing standpoint, I think that would be quite helpful as to why we're looking at this figure.
Well, I think I've mentioned the last couple of meetings, as we build our master schedules at the middle school and high school, we're trying to pinpoint how much staff we need, and then we are trying to realize efficiencies where we can, and working with Mr. Grow in particular, because that's where the bulk of our enrollment increases at the high school level. We're trying to reduce sections in places where there isn't as much student demand for courses, and then we're trying to shift those sections to places where we have more classes that are either at 24, 25, or 26 students. So Mr. Grow has been doing that. We've realized a little bit of breakage thus far this school year, moving into next year's budget, in the form of folks who retire, and when we bring on new folks, there's a lower salary. So we're using some of that money that we have available to put teachers in place. So as of right now, as we look into next year, we're at a good place, or we're at where we have been in terms of class sizes at the high school. Enrollment dictates the number of sections we need K-5, so we keep monitoring that. And I've been working with Ms. Grant and the elementary school principals about the number of sections they need. So we've made some reductions, as we mentioned in other meetings. And as of right now, we have the addition of the American Sign Language teacher at the high school. We have enough interest in it at the middle school to warrant more staff, but we don't have that in place yet. We're going to see how things continue to unfold in terms of potential retirements and whether or not we can free up some money that way. And we have also another section at one of our elementary schools that right now, or grade level I should say, that doesn't warrant another section and could be a potential reduction, but we haven't counted on that yet, and that's at Southern Boulevard School.
And you can just address and tell the board what we're doing in terms of the changes or the additions in mental health as well.
Sure. So one of the needs that we have wanted to address for several years running now is to increase the child study team resources at the high school. So since our last board meeting, the psychologist that we've identified would be that individual. Prior to last board meeting, we had already determined we wanted to add a student assistance counselor. That would be a third student assistance counselor like Lisa Lattarulo and Alex Emmer, who were here a couple of months ago. And initially, we had designs on potentially employing an additional counselor, but we don't have that in the budget yet, so that's one of the positions that's been left off the table, if you will. Again, not knowing if there's more flexibility moving forward, from folks who retire or some other, issue, additional state aid, for example, we could always reconsider that and think about putting another counselor in place. But at this moment, we don't have that. But we think at least expanding by a psychologist and a student assistance counselor, we're moving in a very positive direction in terms of bolstering the resources that the mental health folks have in district.
I have a question. When will we know if we're getting additional state aid?
Where things stand right now is that there's somewhat of a showdown happening between Senator Sweeney, who is holding up the confirmation of the new Commissioner of Education over the issue of school funding, and the governor's office. And early signs, at least in the past 2 weeks, are that the governor's office is going to revisit state aid allocations with the intention of distributing more aid to districts that are underfunded. We are in the category of districts that are underfunded. If that happens, it would probably unfold similarly to how it did last year, in that when they are having their budget negotiations meetings and the state is required to adopt a budget by June 30th or the government shuts down. So by June 30th, we would know if our state aid allocation changes. We are fortunate in that we won't be in the lot of districts who lose state aid. Like last year, for example, there were districts that were told they were getting X dollars, but then June 30th, they got that money taken away. That won't happen to us. It could happen to other districts again this year.
Pray for state aid.
I have a question. So in this budget that you're proposing, Matt, there's a psychologist that's going to work specifically at the high school with the child study team,
Yes,
and a student assistance counselor?
yes.
What will that job look like?
We're working on that now. We know we want that person to extend beyond the high school or middle school, because right now we don't have a student assistance counselor K-5, which is appropriate, but we could use some support at Lafayette Avenue School. We know that both Lisa and Alex have been shouldering a heavy burden, so this person would also spell them. We're talking about possibly staggering hours a little bit, so we have someone available longer after school, whereas right now the folks are locked into the school day for the most part. So I guess the short answer that I'm making too long is that we would use them in a broader capacity from a grade level standpoint, not just grades 6 through 12, and we would try to provide additional services in addition to helping Alex and Lisa a little bit, additional services that we're not providing right now.
Definitely a need. A quick question, what's the salary range on that? I'm sorry, could you remind me of that?
That's a teaching position.
Okay.
So the salary range corresponds to our teacher salary guide. But the caveat there is folks with that, with those qualifications have usually much more education than a starting teacher. So it would be probably at least in the mid to upper range of what our salary guide is for teachers.
Sure, so I just had a question. When y'all were discussing the student assistant counselors, did it come up at all instead of hiring a full-time person, to consider taking interns from the Masters of Social Work who can maybe alleviate some of the burden that our two counselors have, and maybe we would be able to hire more of them without, having to provide benefits because it's an internship situation, so that they could maybe lighten the load and maybe take the cases, because these people are about to come into the workforce to become counselors. Was that a discussion item? Like, did we discuss maybe hiring 3 of those to help us with our needs as opposed to hiring just one
Well, I think
to maybe offset the...
from an intern standpoint, I don't know that that would be a viable option. Just from a liability perspective, the kinds of sign-offs we need, even when we bring a student teacher in, and those folks would have to report to someone who has to manage someone who's not fully credentialed. And I'd have to look a little bit more closely about what kind of liabilities that could bring up in terms of labor and negotiated agreements with our staff.
I just didn't know if that was an option for us that we even looked at, or because we wouldn't have to insure them. They could, come in at a much lower rate.
I would have a concern with that, though.
I would too, but I was waiting for Ms. Chambers to.
But I think that a lot of the people who are at the master's level who are interning are not going to be first-year master candidates, and we could maybe specify what type of intern we would look for. And I think that would give us a little bit of a stretch in our budget to maybe help some of these children who maybe aren't at the far end of needing help, where Mrs. Latarula and her staff could really intervene there, but maybe just somebody to talk to for these children, because these people are trained in this. I mean, we're not looking at candidates who are going into their first year of their master's, but who are about to finish. That is part of their curriculum, is to have an internship. Monmouth University has a huge intern program with their Masters of Social Work. And I just wanted to know if that would be a way we could maybe offset some costs, yet providing a wide sweeping or, a little broader use of those funds to cover, and maybe affect more children.
We could, that's not something I'd considered. I don't know any other district that does that.
Okay.
What districts do, though, is contract out.
Sure.
There are a number of
Contract.
companies that supply, supply contracted workers for districts. I have spoken to 2 other superintendents who are doing that right now. It's not as inexpensive as I thought it might be from what they've told me, and we do have an arrangement with Project Community Pride at the Y. Now, my understanding is there's about a 2-month wait period right now.
I know you can't get in there.
So we
agree.
But Vin and I can certainly reach out, and Beth too, to some of the graduate schools to see what kind of arrangements they make with school districts and what they might be willing to help us with.
It was just a thought, because I thought it might be a way, if we're going to ask our community to pay, almost 3.5% more in taxes, is there a way that we could maybe more efficiently use those dollars and cover a broader spectrum? I mean, these are almost professionals. Like, if we hire them as an intern, we hire teachers to teach our children. I think that these people are not that far away from becoming professionals. That I think it's a serious option and a way to maybe leverage some of our tax dollars. I would like to be able to say to our community that, we as a board are looking at ways to stretch our dollars further before we go and ask for the full, to use a term that we heard last time. I don't want to necessarily have to raise taxes. I am of the belief that, we are really, really in a great place, that we have such a low cost to educate our students at such a high rate and with such great success. And I would say that, when I send my kids to college, I really don't say to my college, I'd love to pay 3.5% more. to educate my children, having done it 4 times. So I think in good faith, I would like to see if we could maybe talk about where we could stretch some of our dollars and maybe fill in some gaps without necessarily putting it all on the taxpayers. I know that we're, if we can reallocate funds, I don't know if that was discussed, but I just feel like this is a big jump that we haven't done in a while, and I understand we have the bank cap and the ability to do it. But I wrestle with that because I feel like most, the reviews I've seen is just more and more and more, not, okay, but we're going to try and cut here, and we're going to try and cut here. And I understand the breakage and the non-renewals and the retirees, but, in good faith, I think if we're going to negotiate with our community and ask them for this, I think that should be part of the discussion, and I hope that is part of the Finance
All
Committee's
right,
discussions.
So, Mary, in the Finance Committee and in prior board meetings, absolutely, I would like the taxpayers to know that we consider so many different things, new revenue sources, other things, whether it's Chromebooks, things that we've been discussing. To address your immediate point about the mental health professionals, I would disagree with you. I would think in something that important, where trust and continuity is important for students, that's not where you want to skimp and bring in a student teacher who's here for 3 months in a rotation and then someone else comes in. You want, correct me if I'm wrong, that's my opinion. That's not where I would go to look to try to save benefits for a counselor to replace them with 2 interns.
Well, once, those internships are year-long usually. That's part of their curriculum. In the research that I did, at least at Monmouth University, it wouldn't be a short-term thing. It would be a year-long internship. So that's why I suggested it, because I thought it might, prove worthy for, not every case we have is a high-risk case.
There will be other things that we are addressing in the Finance Committee that we'll be making recommendations to the board. And we look forward to doing that.
Mary, when you did your research, are there any documented cases of them interning at schools in New Jersey?
I have in my research, I have seen that there has been not. My research did not pan to New Jersey yet. The amount of time I had to research this over the weekend was other school districts across the country have done this, especially large, and school districts with our size, like 5,000 students, have brought in Master of Social Work interns for a year, because it is part of their curriculum, and it's been a way for them to address the student need of, the mental health issues that we're having in the schools, and it's a way for us to leverage our investment in that. And I appreciate everyone's opinion on that, but I think that it's just one option, and I just didn't know if it was something that we considered or had talked to anybody about doing. And I know that a contract work was another thing, but I wasn't a fan of that. But I thought this was, they can work closely with the 2 counselors that we have, Mrs. Larula, and I forget the other, I don't have it in front of me, Mrs. Where they would work with them. It wouldn't be like we just put them out there. Like, they would be only assigned cases that we had a level of comfort with. It wouldn't be that we would send them out to cover everyone. There's definitely, levels of need, So that's just a thought,
I think Dr. LaSouza made a good point. I would first check the collective bargaining agreement.
Yeah, I just didn't know if that was an
if
option.
there's a unit work issue in regard to what the teachers can and can't do, especially, in such a unionized state.
Yeah, like I didn't know if it
not
was
to
out of contract.
waste a lot of time. I think that would be the first thing I would do prior
Sure.
to looking at it as an option, because it may not be an option. Certainly worth looking at, but
Sure.
it just could,
Yeah, but then if we could spread them across the, because we do have a need at the lower grades. It came up in the presentation that they're seeing it pushed down to the 4 or 5 level. So, if we're going, is a full-time, part-time person, because if we hire a full-time person, they're going to be part-time at the schools anyway. So I was just wondering if we could maybe put a little more continuity into it that way. And I thought it might be a budget item that we could consider.
I'll tell you right now, the overriding theme when we've ended our Finance Committee meetings over the last 6 weeks has been instructing the administration that we need to figure out ways to do more with less. Because we are not going to have more going forward. We spoke about this in the last public meeting, which is that crowding out effect in terms of wages and benefits taking on a rising percentage of the overall budget. We have a restricted tax line with, unfortunately, not unrestricted costs, but more difficult to manage costs. So, listen, education is going to have to change, and how we address that is one of the most important things that we have stressed to Dr. Sousa and the staff, is that we realize that dollars are going to be harder to come by moving forward, and we need to learn how do we get better in terms of doing more with less. Now it's figuring it out, and I don't know if we have the answers, but it's very difficult to understand how we're going to maintain a lot of things that we have now going forward when we've got difficult dollar issues. We're going to be.
Yeah, I just, to go back, I'm not comfortable with an internship status. I think that's something the board has discussed. We have a mental health crisis in our district right now. We have data that reported from our students indicating high rates of suicide rates, thoughts of suicide. We need trained professionals to be in front of these students, to get preventative care for our students, to help with stress management, so that we know that as a board, as a community, that those kids feel supported. They need continuity to know if they are in this school district for X amount of years that this individual is present. Oftentimes, students who are in crisis take time to be able to reach out for help, to be able to form relationships that are healthy and open and productive. And I also think, my experience as a teacher, there are privacy laws, there are very, very strict things within the field of special education, within the field of therapy, so on, that a certified personnel is what I believe is best for our students here in Chatham, someone with a degree, someone with experience who can help get in front of this mental health crisis.
All right, any more questions?
I'm going to make this may be unpopular. We go through a lot of details behind the scenes, and we look at a lot of bills, and we look at a lot of, we do a lot of overseeing to how the district's done. We don't make policy, but we oversee it. In general, we're looking at a fantastically performing administration that's lean, where we are lucky to have people in place. So I understand that we don't want to raise taxes. I understand that no one likes the fact that they're losing a deduction for their home. I understand that no one wants to pay more money. But at the same, I think it's dangerous if we're going to move to a point where the public has a right to know and everyone opens up and we're all going to start to go over to Mike's office and Peter's office and look over their shoulder and ask them how many pencils that they're using for this. I think that's dangerous. So I want to go on record saying that.
Okay, very good. Sorry, Matt, just one comment on that. I'm not taking the meeting back. I'm enjoying the seat. But I just wanted to, Mike, the statistic that we reference or we're dancing around, correct me if I'm wrong, but Alex Emmer and Lisa Latarullo indicated that on the survey, 152 students contemplated suicide to the point of where they developed a plan or they thought of a plan. And again, just to be clear, there's questions that say, have you ever considered suicide? And there's another question that says, have you ever considered a plan, which essentially is a nice way of saying, have you considered a method in which to end your life? That's the critical and acute nature that we're dealing with. That is what the student assistance counselor will help us out with. When we asked Lisa and Alex, what will help move the needle? What will help get you, the help that you need? And they didn't talk about programs. They talked about personnel. They needed more eyes, more consistency in the district at a younger age, so that we could these kids that are in crisis, catch them at a younger age and hopefully catch them before they commit suicide again. So the statistic was 152 of our students here in Chatham self-reported that they have contemplated suicide to the point in which they have thought of a method in which to end their life. That's why we're taking the student assistance counselor position. So it's such a critical need. It was the top of the list when I believe the finance committee met. So we talk about, students are in crisis. That is a self-reported statistics from our students here in Chatham.
I appreciate that, Jill. And I do believe that's definitely something that we have to address, no doubt. But I believe if we have one additional student counselor, it's still going to be a part-time position, because it's not going to be, that person is not going to be able to get to Lafayette every day. I mean, it'll have hours, but it won't be a full-time position there. It won't be, it's going to have to spread it thin across all the schools. So I appreciate that one student assistant counselor is definitely, student assistant counselors is definitely a high priority. I appreciate that. I really do. However, I question how much that counselor is going to be able to spend at each school, because we have so many children and so many schools. And is this going to be only the third person added to that team?
The third SAC, but there are other counselors.
Right. So it's going to be the third SAC. So we're going to have three counselors for 4 through 12. Possibly if you wanted to move them down to K, K through 3, which they indicated that was, they were seeing that anxiety move down to the lower levels. Definitely these children have a lot to be anxious about, no doubt. However, I just want to make sure that would it be better to have, this is just one item, again, just one idea like we could consider. I'm not saying we don't need these people. I'm just saying, are we looking at everything? Are we looking at reallocating sports money so we can fund other teams? Are we looking, even if we take that clump of money, can we redivide it? Like, I don't have a clear understanding of how that works. So I am asking the questions and just making suggestions because I don't know. And I think a lot of the people who are watching and are here may not know what is considered and is not considered. And I think that's where there's a lot of, like you said, like things get started and rumors get started and sometimes there's distrust and misunderstanding and miscommunication. And I just want to be able to say, like, yes, we're trying to do this, and I want to have a level of comfort at that. That's all I'm saying. Like, again, it was just one observation. I'm not saying, but I question if we bring one more person in, like, how many more hours does that put at all the schools? That's my question. And so I know it's more than we have. And
I have that question. I defer to the boots on the ground.
Sure.
I defer to the people who have much more expertise than we do. Darren Grove,
Right.
Mike L'Souza, Lisa Latarullo. When they come and they tell Mike, we need these resources, this is what I need to do a better job to deal with what I have before us. Mike says, I think this is reasonable, or I don't think it's reasonable, and he brings it up to the board and we talk about it.
But in my opinion, I think Mrs. Latarullo would love to have 4 more counselors to do her job more effectively. So
Well, let's go to 10.
That's what I'm saying. Like, and at some point, we have to look at that and see, like, what's the best thing we can do versus what we can do, and how can we find something in the middle and maybe compromise a little bit. That's all I'm saying.
Well, I think there are other things to
Besides
compromise,
that, yes.
but not on the mental health, not on bringing in 2-year master's students, even if it's their second year at Monmouth. I'm not comfortable with that being the stopgap to address the crisis that we've all been discussing for the past year.
Yeah, I think the disconnect is, we just had one in the hallway before this, right? So we're not in each other's committee meetings, right? So we don't know what's discussed in the finance meeting or the curriculum committee or whatever. That's where the disconnect comes in, and I think that we could probably do a better job of communicating across committees somehow to make those things clear. In the finance committee, we're certainly looking at every single possible way to raise revenue or to increase efficiencies in everything that we do. There's work to do for sure, though. Make sense?
Yeah, I mean, if you picked apart a budget every year, you would understand that things are continuously moving in terms of where our priorities are, in terms of, when we get to the dollar figures in terms of what we're allowed to do, they come to us with a wish list, and then we basically try to guide them continuously towards a dollar figure that we are comfortable with in terms of taking that to the public. And they try to make those figures work within that dollar amount. So they're constantly reevaluating what's a priority and what's not a priority in shifting funds. I can tell you right now, these conversations are going to be a heck of a lot more difficult in 3 years than they are right now. Sports is going to be in a very interesting situation where that could be in 3 years in terms of potentially us having to take dollars from sports. I mean, there's all different kinds of things you see around the country where people are grabbing revenues from and what they are forcing back onto parents of students. And some of this is driven by the fact that they're trying to reduce the burden on non-contributing parents within the district. So they're looking for revenues outside of pure tax dollars in order to put more of the onus on the parents that utilize the services in town. So we're at a massive turning point's not the word. We're at a tipping point right now. As I said to you last time, this is the worst business model in the world. We have a fixed revenue line and a variable cost line. And we are in a point whereby the decisions and the difficult decisions are going to have to be made in some of our guidance, but we have to, of course, rely upon the expertise of the administration as to where we can cut from and force more money into certain avenues. And again, potentially having to do more with less. And unfortunately, less may be less teachers 5 years from now. I don't know what less is going to mean and where less is going to come from, but less is coming from somewhere. I don't know what that is.
And there's two important components to this discussion. There's the revenue side and there's the cost side. The cost side, I don't think anyone on this dais questions the efficiency and how well the district is run. I think we're all there. On the revenue side, Matt's absolutely right. Where I think we're going to see changes is we are going to be shifting. We're going to be trying to get revenues to run the school district based on use. So if a kid who's playing 6 sports and doing that kid is going to pay more than. We're going to try to put some of the burden of that on that family as opposed to the elderly couple on the street who doesn't have kids in, and we don't want to see them move out because it's their home for how many years. So we're trying to, that's where I think we can get much more creative than the cost side. And obviously the entire state, not just Chatham, has a benefits issue.
Oh, 100% the benefits issue. And again, I'm just throwing these out as were these considered again, because I'm not in that.
And I'm heated, and
Oh, no,
you're
I appreciate
heated.
that,
But
Sal. I
I respect your asking, and I'm glad you're asking. You should. There's no such thing as a bad question.
Without a doubt, I appreciate your passion, for sure. But I'm glad, because I think you're right. I think we absolutely have revenue issues that we can address. I've contacted several outside vendors who would love to rent space from us, and I would love to talk to you about that. I think that's definitely, and that's even people not in our town who would be interested in renting our facilities. And I think that, especially with us, that auditorium is a home run. And I think that we can leverage that for sure. And I would love to help with that any way I can, and I would be happy to do that, because I think that is definitely an opportunity that we should take advantage of going forward, especially with what's coming down the pike.
I think we should try to get naming rights for the school district, Mike. The Nike School District of the Chathams for $15 million a year would sound good to me. All right, Community Bank. Community Bank, Chatham High School.
Let's put some placards up on that Cougar Field.
We'll try.
I'll take a placard
Oh,
for
we're going to go,
Community
believe me.
Bank.
We're asking for everything. Policy and planning, Sal.
Policy and planning has not met. Our next meeting is on the 9th.
Liaison reports, Ms. Weber, Chatham Borough.
Nothing to report at this time.
Ms. Clark on the township.
Nothing to report at this time.
Ann or Jill on the boosters?
They haven't met since our last meeting. They're meeting tomorrow.
Okay. Performing arts boosters, Mr. Sal.
Yeah, this is always the longest one. I'm sorry about this. I'm going to be quick. First of all, we had great, the jazz band that performed before us, the New Jersey Jazz Society, wants to congratulate the middle school on the 9th Annual Middle School Jazz Festival, and they sent us very warm congratulations, and I wanted to make sure that those were acknowledged in the board meeting. I'll be quick with performing arts. Spring concert season has already started. On the evening of May 1st, the Chatham High School Directors Showcase of student-directed one-act plays will take place at the middle school. This event provides students a chance to experience the direction process for all details associated with the production of a play. CHS theater teacher Laura Russo has provided this unique opportunity for her students for the past 3 years. Finally, Chatham Performing Arts Boosters will have its final meeting of the 2017-18 year, Wednesday, May 2nd, 7 p.m., Lafayette Lounge. Thank you.
Chatham Education Foundation,
Yes, I just wanted to reiterate what Dr. L'Souza had said, that Casino Royale was a success, and it was well attended, and a lot of people came. It was a very fun night, and we thank everyone for their efforts that came out.
Okay, Chatham Rec, nothing to report in PTO District Cabinet?
Their meeting Wednesday.
Meeting Wednesday, okay. On the minutes, I'd like to make a motion to move approval of the minutes.
Second.
These are for the minutes of April 16th, public session and executive session.
I think I have to abstain
Yes.
for the next 4 meetings.
Okay, the minutes, the regular and executive minutes, regular and executive session minutes from April 16th. Mr. Gilchrist?
Yes.
Mr. Arnold?
Yep.
Ms. Chambers?
Yes.
Ms. Chigarelli?
Yes.
Ms. Clark?
Abstain.
Ms. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Ryan?
Yes.
Mr. Valenti?
Yes.
And Ms. Weber?
Yes.
Agenda, minutes passed 801.
Okay, now we have our first opportunity for public commentary. And our timekeeper, Ms. Clark.
Very comfortable there.
I see nobody, I'm going to take it down. I'm not going to pull a Ms. Weber here, we are taking it down.
Good evening. Thank you
Mr.
for
Ruth, how
the
are you?
opportunity to comment. My name
Mr. Lewis,
is...
can I ask one question? Where is your sweater?
Where's my what?
Your sweater. This is the first
Oh,
one
it
I've
was
not seen
cold
you with a
today, but
sweater.
not that cold.
Okay.
So I would like to thank you for the opportunity to comment, and thank you for your hard work. And I appreciate particularly Mr. Ryan and Ms. Chambers coming into the board new, because about 10 years ago I came onto the board new, and I know it's like drinking from a fire hose. There's a lot to learn. A school district is a very complex thing, and the budget itself is a very complex thing. And I spent 3 years where you're sitting, and I spent time in Matt's job as the finance committee chair, and I spent a lot of time in Peter's office going through his books. And I can tell you that there's a lot to learn, and there's a lot of complexity there. But I can also tell you that having done that and spent probably 40 hours a week in my time on the board, and a lot of time since then, that I concluded that this district is indeed very well run and very efficiently run. Doesn't mean we can't look for more efficiencies, but I gained a lot of confidence that that efficiency is there. And so after about 10 years of attending board meetings, I've kind of turned my attention now to the Chatham Education Foundation, where I think I can also make a contribution. And our president, Amanda Feeman, is sitting here, and she's a very capable president, and we just had the most successful Casino Royale ever. We raised over $100,000 gross. We probably made $80,000 net. These are world records for us. This will probably be our best year ever after a best year ever last year financially. So we really try to support you in providing private support for the very difficult budget that you are dealing with. And that's what we do, and we're trying to do a better job of that. We're also getting an endowment going. We've already got a $200,000 contribution to the endowment in the bank. I have 1 minute. Okay, well then I better show you this chart right away. This chart has concerned us for many years. This chart came directly off of a chart that you reviewed last week. It shows you the New Jersey per pupil tax levy of the top school districts in the state. Chatham is down here at the bottom. Chatham has been on the bottom for years. Had that happen, all these other districts like Livingston and Princeton and Montgomery and Bernards and Madison and Westfield, they all built up their budgets in the years when there was no 2% cap. Now there's a 2% cap, and we're never going to catch up. So I would like to plead with the board to consider the 3.62% tax levy instead of the lower levy, because we're going to need that money for all the reasons that Matt stated. We have inflation, we have energy, we have medical cost, and those are all going to hit us. And New Jersey has a budget crisis itself. So we need a higher budget than we have, and we're running way behind our peer school districts. This is a problem, and it's been a problem for a long time. So please consider that higher tax levy. Thank you. And just so you don't forget where the voters come out on this, this is when we had a school vote on the budget. For the last 12 years, the budget's passed by an average of 64% in this town. This town supports education. Sure, there's 35% of the people who vote against it, but there's 65% of people on average who vote for it. And this is even in some years where we had a 7% tax increase. This town supports education, and you 9 people are now making this vote for us. But don't forget that this town supports education, and we support you. Thank you.
Hi, Amanda Feeman, and I'm the president of the Chatham Education Foundation, and I will follow Alan because Alan has a lot of the history. But as I listened to you tonight, the things that you're talking about, and you heard Sam Eckert read my statement last year when you talked about, we're not talking about window dressing, we're talking about needs. And we're talking tonight about compromising mental health. I mean, we're talking about interns. And I will tell you, I have a child who just the transition of her counselor to another school who's very experienced. It's a whole year backwards. So if you're going to rotate interns in and out at younger grades, that's a significant impact. And we're considering significant issues, yet we're not willing to go to 3.62 versus 3.48, which Alan didn't show our lovely pie chart with all the organizations that are supplementing and supporting what you're doing. So if we're leaving banked cap on the table because we're not going to 3.62, the numbers that Alan just said for $80,000, they're gone. You just wiped us out. That's a full year grant cycle. If we build an endowment and we spend off $80,000 worth of interest and you just left $80,000 on the table, what Alan and I just did for a whole year, it was somewhat pointless. And you are very fortunate to have 2 people, because I can tell you Alan and I both work almost full-time, working to get to that $110,000. You're at risk if we're not sitting in these chairs, because you may not get someone who's willing to work that much. You're also very, very fortunate because you have someone who, I've got another 16 years to go in the district, and you know that I've been here for about 6 years, committed in every way, in every step of the way, through 2 referendums, through advocating for full-day kindergarten, and I'm familiar with compromise. I guess, since I have 1 minute left, the one thing I also want to highlight is what I'm seeing from a needs perspective, and when we go to the 3.62, and why I advocate for it, is even in the types of grants we're getting from the foundation, I will tell you, we're looking at grants right now that are asking us for things like $8,200 worth of books. I mean, those are basic needs. So the things that we used to see, which were laptop computers and that were innovative, the types of grants that we are getting have changed, and they are far more basic needs met. And that's just going to grow and grow and grow. And the question is, how much can we continue to grow to supplement you if you don't grow as much as you can from a tax increase? So thank you.
Jane Devlin, Chatham Township. Again, I urge also, do not skimp on the budget. Please vote for 3.62. Teachers, supplies, counselors are all basic needs. I would not support student interns providing mental health services. If we had interns under the auspices of licensed mental health professionals, much the same like we have student teachers shadow and learn from classroom teachers. That's one thing, to just open up an internship program. But to give interns their own student caseloads of minor children doesn't seem like a best practice. So I do not think we should use student interns in any way for counseling of the students in the Chatham School District. And I was once a student internship, having succeeded in getting a master's in social work. But my school, Fordham, would have never placed the students in that kind of setting, at least at the time when I went. Also, bringing on an additional licensed psychologist for the child study team is different than a mental health clinician like an MSW or a student assistant counselor to provide ongoing counseling to the student populations. So when I heard tonight that you're going to add the licensed child psychologist to the child study team, to me, that has not really addressed fully the mental health component and emerging needs in the school district at large. Although I do support the child study team, I also believe that we need more certified mental health clinicians for all the populations, not just the students that are beneficiaries of the child study team. So if we add one student assistant counselor only, and they are going throughout Lafayette besides Chatham Middle School and Chatham High School, that's probably insufficient too. So I'm not sure why we are going with the expense of a psychologist for the child study team, but we are not considering adding more than one additional student counselor district-wide. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, I'm Jill Strickler. I live in Chatham Borough and Chatham Township also. And I really urge you to maximize the amount that you can spend this year. It only compounds, obviously, you all know that. And I can't reiterate strongly enough, I was a founding member of Education Counts. This is a town that will support education, and this is a town that absolutely needs to maintain the quality of its schools because we are branded as a great school town. If we lose that branding, financially, this downward cycle will really accelerate. We need you to spend every penny that is available for you to spend, and to spend it exceedingly wisely. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Stuart Carr from 3 Crestwood Drive in Chatham. First of all, with all due respect to Mr. Ryan, I think that disconnect was actually a good thing. This is probably the first time, except maybe with Mr. Gilfillan with the vote a couple of years ago, the first time I've actually seen a debate in public. I think that's terrific. We're going back and forth and haggling, I think it's a good term, in public about good issues. A lot of times that stuff happens behind closed doors and you come out with answers. This back and forth, I think, is very healthy. So whatever we didn't do is probably a good thing, coincidentally, because like I said, it's very informative for me and I think for the public in general. So you can't take hours doing it, but I think the idea of having this is, again, something that's appreciated, I think, by the public. Reason I'm here will be the second public session. I want to talk a little bit about waste of time and Ferraris and dead horses, but we'll get to that at the next meeting, or the next session. I wanted to ask here about a question I had in January, February, when I was last here, about the public question, non-binding question on a CapEx from the capital reserve account, where that is in the facilities/finance committee process. I know when I asked that question in February, we were going to put it to a committee. I think Ms. Weber said that. What's been the discussion? What's the status on thinking about a best practice of having a public question, non-binding, for CapEx coming out of capital reserve account north of, say, $1.5 million or $2 million for new projects not deferred maintenance or routine CapEx.
I've come back in a month, because basically February through now is just purely
Very-
budget situations.
Not
So
a-
come back in a month and we'll readdress
Okay,
that.
not a problem on that. The other thing too about the, just again, I know it's literally footings in the ground now with the central office building. But again, we knew about 2 years ago a lot of these issues that are here now concerning highest and best uses of money. That $2.5 or $3 million or $2.2 million, whatever the number is, you take $100,000, thank you, and run that out. That's really 2 FTEs for the next 10 years. So maybe instead of having the bricks, and even though it wouldn't be highest and best use, keeping the offices and stuff over here with the rent with Chatham Township and using that money for some of these clinicians, again, in hindsight, may have been a good idea. And I think perhaps the idea, again, of having a capital reserve account, public question, may be able to keep that in line going forward. So if you can keep that in mind. Finally, Mr. Nevin, I believe, said the other day about this max the tax thing. Again, he's talking about marketing, and that may be a problem, et cetera. I think the idea of max the tax is a good thing, frankly, because it actually tells us what we're doing here. We're talking about using tax money, and we're actually talking about the issue. We're not dancing around it, and I think that's a good thing. Final comment is, what I haven't heard from the board, we're talking now about we're the lowest on the totem pole per Mr. Ruth, et cetera, about what we're spending. Maybe that's the case. On the other hand, we're doing very, very well. Has the board said, here's what our budget should be? And maybe it's we raise taxes 13.5% or 27% or whatever it is. What would we actually think would be something to make us comfortable? And just say, okay, per Mr. Ruth's comment, let's put it out to the public and vote. Because this whole idea about a revenue, ceiling is really not a ceiling at all. All you've got to do is ask. We could raise the prices 22%. Just ask. And if you have the case and make the case and have the thesis that's justified, the public will probably buy it. But we haven't heard that. All we're heard about is we're stuck with this, cap, and we're trying to work within it. Well, say what you'd need to get, and maybe the public will buy into it. I haven't heard that. Well, should the budget be 110 million bucks? Maybe so.
I don't believe from a taxing perspective we could ever do that.
Just have a series of second questions.
Actually, the biggest reason why you see where we have a dollar figure that declines in terms of our competitive group is the fact that we are one of the few with a growing denominator, and everyone else has a declining denominator. So there is some misperception in terms of what those dollar figures are, but we're growing faster than we can handle with our budget.
No, all point taken. But again,
And
just
I will tell you right now,
ask the public.
what scares me with the tax situation as is that we're going to see a significant rotation out of the non-contributing houses. People finally just have to give up on the tax situation and move out, and we're going to see a self-fulfilling prophecy of massive continued influx of people into our town that we don't get new revenues from.
Right.
So I don't believe from a tax perspective we could even look at that. It would have to be done in a second question, but second questions are very strict in terms of what they're allowed to ask for, but most particular, the bigger issue is their binding.
Right. Have a series of
So-
second questions. If you need it, ask for it. Maybe we do it, maybe we won't. But I mean, the public is the one who's the customer. Again, if you want to grow the business, you've got to convince the customer to buy your product. You say we want to have a better product, we want to build the business, we want a $110 million budget, whatever it is, ask. Here's what we need. Categorize it with second questions or whatever else you need, and ask.
It's interesting. A couple of years ago, we had a large referendum, which would have been achieved at a substantially lower interest rate, and we would have had a performing arts center, which would have been grand and much more suitable to address Mary's proposal of renting it out to outside interests. These are the types of things that this board and this administration, or not this board, I wasn't on the board at the time, looked at, and that's the type of forward thinking they do. The tax base doesn't always agree.
Agreed.
It is hard, so it's very easy. You mentioned hindsight. I'll tell you from hindsight, I would have rather borrowed more money at a lower interest rate, having roughly the same monthly payment that we have right now, the same debt service, or marginally higher, and have substantially more. Have turfed fields behind the high school. Have all these things that we're all juggling and trying to plug holes right now. Hindsight, that would have been a great idea as well.
I happen to agree, but the issue again there was not, it wasn't the dollar. I'll come back.
It can't be a back and forth. We have to let people come up, say what they have to say. People had presentations, so we have to.
move on.
Mr. Marino.
Hello, Dan Marino from the township. I heard some things I really liked about finding revenue and about getting more from people that actually gain the benefits, or asking, not getting more, but asking families to contribute more. And I guess we're down, you've proposed something where you're down to $86,000 in terms of what you can ask the taxpayer, which is a good amount of money, but I think it pales in comparison to what families would pay for these extracurricular activities. I pay for it, I'm willing to pay for it, I've been paying for it for 4 years for my daughters and my son to sail, and other families have done the same. I think, to the gentleman's point, you just have to ask for it. We're getting services, we're getting good services, and there's nothing wrong with saying, we need you to pay more for the services that you're getting. Instead of asking the 75-year-old to pay the extra $20 a month or a year, whatever it comes out to, ask the families that are benefiting from these great services to simply pay for them. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, it's fair, it's equitable. My kid sails 2 seasons. He should pay 2 participation fees instead of 1. To me, it's just money that's just sitting there. People will pay for those things willingly. If the sailing team pays and the volleyball team pays, why wouldn't the football team pay more? Why wouldn't the soccer team pay more? I think that's an obvious place to ask for more money when you're not really arguing about it. You're basically saying, we're giving you more services, we need you to contribute more. To pay for a mental health counselor or another English teacher, that's a slam dunk. That is a slam dunk. And yes, I agree that we're going to have some tough decisions. And we should, in my opinion, we should take money from the extracurricular activities and put it towards basic needs, and then ask the people who are getting the benefits of the extracurricular activities to pay for that. People will pay for those things. They may not, if you passed around the hat and said, we need some money for a mental assistance counselor, I don't know how much you get, but if you said, I need you to pay $200 for your kid to play football or sail, every single person on that team would pay. And if there's someone who can't, we accommodate you. I just think we're arguing over $86,000 when we could be raising hundreds of thousands of dollars from families. Thank you.
All right, we're going to close first public commentary, move on to the action items. Don't forget there is a second opportunity for public commentary. Action items, personnel, Ms. Kenny.
Yes, I'd like to move action items A1 to A20 for vote.
Second.
Just want to congratulate Ramon Villamarine on his retirement. He's one of our maintainers and resident electricians.
How many years?
HVAC. I don't know how many years he's been here, but
Long time.
long enough.
Yeah, Mike did. Mike Valenti.
Ready for vote? Okay. Agenda items A1 through A20. Mr. Gilpin.
Yes.
Mr. Arnott.
Yep.
Ms. Chambers.
Yes.
Ms. Ciccarelli.
Yes.
Ms. Clark.
Yes.
Ms. Kenny.
Yes.
Mr. Ryan.
Yes.
Mr. Valenti.
Yes.
And Ms. Weber.
Yes.
Agenda items passed 9-0.
Just like to move action items B1 through 15. Second.
Second?
Sal seconded. Don't forget, guys, within there on number 2 is the budget figure. A couple of donations. High school PTO, the amount of $10,658 for the purchase of a Life Fitness Integrity Power Mill for the weight room. 8 art stools, 1 art portfolio cabinet, and 1 4-station art workbench table, and a cartridge and a pear tree. Chatham Athletic Boosters, $3,200 to the high school for the fencing club for fencing strip and incidentals. And then last but not least, the Shipler Family Fund scholarship donation in the amount of $500 from Fidelity for Charitable Trust. We thank everyone for their efforts, but most importantly, we thank the Chatham Education Foundation for their absolute incredible efforts.
Matt, just a question for the Finance Committee, based on anything you heard with the Finance, I don't sit on the Finance Committee, consider going from 348 to 362?
We,
I know the activity fee is definitely,
all these fees, listen, fees are going up, people. They are going up across the board. We're going to find every single fee we can actually throw on people, and it is my belief that the more people who are utilizing the services are going to be paying for the services. That's not something that we weren't able to accomplish in this near term, so there will be for further discussion post tonight. What we always stress is the dollar figure that we're asking from the community is it's to maintain the excellence of where the district is. And if 3.48 keeps us at that level of excellence, then that was the figure that we supported. And if we had to stretch to 362 in order to maintain that excellence, we were willing to go to 362. With 3.48, we are maintaining and actually still have some leverage and some leeway potentially coming for where we can add additional services to the within the budget. But you know, it was our constant guidance is maintain excellence, and that is where we are at 3.48.
Thank you, Matt.
I think also, I want to thank the Finance Committee because these are volunteers who have met tirelessly, many, many meetings during the day away from their own jobs and families, and meetings at night, and meeting again to get to this number. I, gave my input. I appreciate, I don't sit down with the dollars and cents, and they are based on what the needs are. We can hope for more state aid, and if more state aid does come in, then hopefully we can put some more things in to build onto the budget we have now. I am very grateful that we were able to bring class sizes down. That was the biggest thing that I was most concerned about, and I think through the guidance of the administration that we were able to contain that for this year at least, and I appreciate that. And thank you, the Finance Committee.
Pete?
Agenda items B1 through 15. Mr. Gilpin?
Yes.
Mr. Arnott?
Yes.
Ms. Chambers?
Yes.
Ms. Chicarelli?
Yes.
Ms. Clark?
Yes.
Ms. Kenny?
Yes.
Mr. Ryan?
Yes.
Mr. Valenti?
Yes.
And Ms. Weber?
yes.
Agenda items passed 9-0.
Now moving on to curriculum, Ms. Chicarelli.
I'd like to move action items C1 to C3 on the regular agenda.
I'll second. Can I second?
Yeah, sure.
Could you give us a little bit more information about number 3? I haven't, in terms of what type of consent we will have to get from the students and the parents?
I defer to them.
Yeah, I'll pass that to Karen Irvin.
What a fun thing.
But periodically, we have staff members who either for their final coursework for their doctorate or for a master's degree program work in district on whatever project that they're doing. Usually there are institutional sign-off forms that the university provides so that if they're working with any student subjects, we comply with whatever the university requires in terms of getting releases. But they can go into more specifics.
The research that Mrs. Moore is doing is focusing on teachers creating behavior-wide support programs within their classrooms to see the efficiencies of doing that. So entire classrooms will be worked on, but it's really not working on directly with any particular children. So she's had all of her performance reviews from her university approved, but there's no impact on it directly on individual children.
No, I just didn't recall ever having seen this before, so I was just, have we done these before?
Yes.
Missy Holzer might jog your memory. We had Missy Holzer a year or two ago for her doctorate in science research at Rutgers, and I'm trying to think of someone else off the top of my head. We have them from time to time.
Okay. So we do have interns or special projects work being done in the schools.
These are staff members who are completing their degree, but we have had interns in our counseling office, counselors who are going there, and even with a nurse or two we've had. But the ones that we've been involved with, they're not permitted to be alone with kids. So they're cooperating counselor or school nurse or whatever must be present at all times when there is a child present.
And let me just be clear, like, I wasn't suggesting that we do this intern program. I said, is it something we could maybe look at going forward to maybe fill some needs, to work alongside, with paperwork or whatever? If they meet side by side with the counselors and the children, if they could follow up with the paperwork so Mrs. Lattarullo would be free to meet with more children. And it's just an option. It's not something that I'm saying, yes, let's do it. But I'm just saying, I think, I would hate to see our counselors bogged down in any kind of paperwork when they could be meeting directly with the children. And that's where I was coming from with that suggestion. I wasn't saying that they'd be responsible 100% for the children. I would say that they would be support for the counselors that we have. And I was by no means saying, yes, let's do it. Just, could we consider it? To stretch
I think you said it was a good consideration, but I think I heard you say to have these counselors or interns work with lower profile cases or kids with less significant needs. So that is direct contact. with
Yes,
kids
that is,
and
but not
direct
alone, not alone.
Well, then
Under
that's-
the, I said under the supervision of the existing counselors,
That
Michelle.
doesn't, we still then need the additional counselors and support.
Absolutely.
To reach kids. So therefore,
100%.
we need the student assistant counselor and the psychologist.
But the psychologist is hired with the child study team. That's
Right,
not
but
going
they
to,
still reach our kids. They still work with our kids in counseling roles. They still, those are just for kids who are classified. Some of those kids have significant mental health needs that need to be addressed. So
Yes.
we are very lucky to be able to bring on another school psychologist to work
I
with our
totally
students.
agree. I agree, but that she is working under the guise
Well, I
of,
just want to make sure I heard you correctly.
Yes, I
earlier,
did.
And at the minutes, we can check them, because you did say that they could work.
They could
We were
work.
hoping that these interns. could
and
work
what I
with
meant
cases.
was under the direction, is what I said, under the direction and supervision of our existing counselors.
Right, but as they cannot be alone with children.
I agree with you there.
Okay, Pete?
Agenda items C1 through C3. Mr. Gilmore?
Yes.
Mr. Arnott?
Yes.
Ms. Chambers?
Yes.
Ms. Chicarelli?
Yes.
Ms. Clark?
Yep.
Ms. Kenny?
Yes.
Mr. Ryan?
Yes.
Mr. Valenti?
Yes.
And Ms. Weber?
Yes.
Agenda items passed 9-0.
Nothing with policy tonight. Board business, I think we probably have had enough of each other. Anyone have anything new? Second time for public commentary.
Hi, Maureen Kelly, Chatham Township. I just want to congratulate the Finance Committee for coming in where they are at. And in the real world, it's a good thing to produce a superior product at a per pupil cost that's lower than our districts that we'd like to compare ourselves to. So everyone's acting like that's a bad thing, but that's actually an excellent thing, which means all of you are doing an excellent job. And yes, people in Chatham Township and Chatham Borough are very supportive of education, and I'm assuming that if the need arose, you would present us with a second question, which would be voted on. But I want to thank you for doing a great job, and I think this whole business, max the tax movement, I think that's a minority of people who are attending the meetings. I don't think it's the general sentiment of everyone in the township and in the borough. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Seeing nobody else, so good, and wouldn't be anything else. Yes.
Stuart Carr again. Yes, I also echo the young lady's comments about terrific work by the Finance Committee with, again, constraints and able to produce a terrific budget. Again, that's kudos to everybody, all 9 of you, not just the people on the Finance Committee. My comment about, the other thing, Mr. Arnott, about the $25 million. I think in that case, it wasn't necessarily the $25 million, it was what was in the $25 million. So perhaps, again, if it wasn't the Art Center that was a problem and there were other uses for $25 million, that absolute number may well have been voted on. I think it was really that particular use that was the issue, potentially. So I agree, again, it was cheap money and all that, but again, people were concerned about the particular use of funds, not the absolute dollar amount I think that was going out for. At least that was the, comment that I got. My comment here about the waste of time and Ferraris and what are beaten dead horses. Mr. Arneck's comment in early February, I think it was, to me, and a comment that it was...
I missed you the last few months.
Yes, sir, I've been chasing around, so sorry about that. In any case, the beating the dead horse, again, I guess I would kind of turn that around a little bit. I was trying to keep the close to dead horse alive by bringing back the idea of a public question on the right to vote on the operating budget. Because again, it was beaten down by the board a couple of years ago. We're getting up to 4 years, assuming there's no mischief in Trenton. Perhaps there will be the ability to come back after 4 years to decide about that, and I think that's something important. The issue I had with the, again, with Ms. Weber was at the League of Conservation Voters discussion, League of Women Voters, excuse me, discussion. There was a specific question about a public question about whether you'd like to go back to April or stay in November. It was not, do you prefer April or November? And there was an unequivocal, yes, I say okay to a non-binding public question. I believe Mr. Ryan was at that same meeting, as was Ms. Chambers, and I think they answered the same question, that yes, they would prefer/support a public question. And I thought, based on those two, plus Ms. Weber, plus Mr. Gilfillan's prior comment, plus a little bit of Ms. Ciccarelli and Ms. Clark over time, that perhaps there would be a groundswell of having a public question. Then Ms. Weber comes back to me and says, just kidding, I didn't really mean that. That's where I was a little bit concerned. It was a public question, so there was a little bit of a difference there. Number two comment about the Ferrari.
Mr. Carr, I have to correct you. I never said to you ever in this universe or our lifetimes, just kidding. Never said that. I'm not going to debate this with you, but you cannot make false statements just because it's being recorded. I never said to you, just kidding. We have had hours of debate on this, and you can say whatever you want, but you cannot lie. I never said just kidding to you.
Well, that is correct. I'm not saying just kidding in that context. I'm saying in the context that you said yes to a public question, and now you say no to a public question. That's what I'm saying, just kidding. Yes, just kidding, it's really no. That's the comment. Two other people said yes, you said yes, but then you say no, and that's fine. The other comment is on the Ferrari issue. Okay, on the Ferrari issue, again, best practice is best done when things are running like a Ferrari. To say that, okay, when things go sour and we get off the rails, then we can come back and talk about public questions, et cetera. There's no way your successor board, who has no idea what they're doing, is going to say, okay, now that we've screwed this up, we're going to allow a public question. The best time to have best practices is when it's running like a top, because you don't need the questions, you don't need to have to worry about what the answer is going to be, because it's running like a top. But if somebody in your successor's shoes has a problem 15, 20 years from now, we need those levers. And that's where the issue, I think, of best practice at this point is a good idea to put in. Thank you.
Mr. Heath?
Good evening, Bill Heath. We'll be short and sweet. A couple of random comments. First, where are we with guns in schools?
We haven't much changed since last meeting.
We've had some, well, first of all, guns in schools means a lot of different things. We're not arming any of our teachers or other staff members. We always welcome the police into our schools. They do patrols on a daily basis. We've had some preliminary discussions with the Chatham Borough and Chatham Township folks about increasing police presence in the schools. That's not something that we've agreed to at this point, but those conversations may well continue as we move forward.
Okay, so at this point, there is no decision to hire Class 3 personnel?
No decision at this time.
And a second question regarding that? That's
not at this
That's
time.
off the table at this point?
No decision has been made at this time for that.
Well, Bill, if I may, because you and I had a brief off-the-record discussion at one point, right, casually, but besides this, I think we're looking at all options in regard to security, and no final decision has been made. We're looking at best practices. We're having discussion with our township and borough police departments, as well as our elected officials, to look at the best practice and the best path forward. So we don't have any decision made, and we're going to continue to do that to try to come out with the best solution for our students and to make this the safest school district that we can.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Fair enough? Or?
Fair enough.
But I don't think any of us, unless I missed something, nobody's ever supported arming teachers or even taken that.
I'm not in
Yeah,
favor of
yeah,
arming teachers, believe me.
Potential option seriously, so that's not the case.
Mhm.
I'm going to interrupt Michelle. Ms. Deeb, to clarify or potentially provide one of the answers, the Class 3 officers are currently excluded from the current budget, and there is no second proposal to either to potentially add them. So they're not in the current budget.
Okay.
Which I think is what you were hinting at the beginning.
Bill,
Exactly.
I just want to go, excuse me, Peter, I know we have time, but I want to, I wanted to just go on a record as saying that, the Class 3 officers are being utilized in different school districts, and they are becoming mainstream, and, they're not a bad thing in itself, as long as it's done the right way and people agree on it, but it is a real option, so, but have we made that decision? As I said, no.
Okay, so as of now, it's
No,
off the table.
no decision. I think everything's on the table.
Mhm.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no others, calling it a night.
Motion to close the open session. Yankees are down 2-0.